As weeks passed, the trio's excursions around town became routine. They were like the Three Musketeers. A born night owl, Daniel got to know everyone at the draft house near Kevin's apartment, where he would talk away the evenings while the couple spent time alone around the corner. The siblings would return to Haverford together, providing a cover for Ashira. Kevin was never sure why Daniel colluded with them. Reluctant to risk a smooth operation by broaching the topic, he never asked. Daniel seemed content to knock around without plan or design, much more laissez-faire socially than he was about his deadly serious business studies. He didn't have a girlfriend. There were always plenty of women at the draft house, and he was content to talk the ear off any head, male or female, that would stay still long enough for the removal. But this routine didn't normally lead to dates. What's wrong with him, Kevin would wonder. It's like he's asexual, maybe a closet case. Whatever his own proclivities, Daniel sympathized with his sister's resistance to the status quo at home. Temple Beth hadn't been enough for him, and he wanted more for his little sister. He was her agent of deliverance and took perverse delight in hoodwinking their parents. Months passed without a parental showdown, lulling the trio into a lazy confidence they were winning the battle of wills. Eventually, Ashira decided to press her hand and bring Kevin home. "He's coming Sunday afternoon," she announced one night at dinner. "It's time you two see the reality of my life. If you don't know him, you don't know me." Daniel stopped chewing in mid-bite. She was on her own with this one. "Besides, you might really like him," she continued. "He has a huge imagination and an incredible artistic vision for the future, and he's good to me. He treats me the way you'd want me to be treated." Recalling the tent on the beach, her brothers stifled a smirk and resumed chewing. Their parents maintained a dour silence. On Sunday, Kevin entered for the first time the house he had seen only from the outside for 10 months. The living room, a symphony of bland beige, displayed the crispness of a faux colonial furniture showroom. Not a single mirrored surface, coffee table, bookshelf, break front, end tables, harbored a detectable speck of dust. Tightly upholstered couch pillows and cushions exhibited no wrinkles. The ivory carpet betrayed no evidence of having ever been walked on. There was little art on the walls, just a framed Rothko painting from the Museum of Art and a faded charcoal drawing of a grandmotherly figure unknown to Kevin. A metallic Hebrew home blessing decorated the wall above the sofa. What the hell is that, he wondered. Wanting no part of the summit, Daniel had escaped to McCloskey's for the Eagles game. The couple was on its own. Ashira fidgeted, consumed by nerves. She steeled herself for a clash, but her parents were slow to enter the battlefield. Wary of mussing the couch, Kevin stood next to it, waiting for direction to sit down. When it was not forthcoming, he remained paralyzed on the foreboding rug. His confidence began to wane with Ashira's distracted silence. 10 minutes later, gaunt Sarah appeared like a noiseless ghost in the dining room archway. She seemed somehow depleted and then refueled by the animating energy of pique. Clammy with anxiety, Kevin summoned a smile and held out a tentative hand. "Pleased to meet you, Mrs. Chatoff," he offered. Sarah stared at him with hard, pained eyes. "Mom?" Sarah didn't speak. "Mom?" Not a word passed the mother's thin lips, but her eyes remained trained on their target like daggers. She barely blinked. Kevin felt he was facing a livid spirit they'd disturbed during one of their moonlight trysts at the cemetery. Giving up, Ashira led her mother by the bony elbow to the kitchen, leaving Kevin standing in the same spot he'd occupied for the last 10 minutes. 5 minutes later, she returned alone. Her eyes were dry, but her face was pale. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "It's okay. We weren't expecting the welcome wagon, were we?" More minutes passed. Kevin ached for his girlfriend's solace, unavailable during the lull in battle. Ben finally descended the staircase, displaying the steely glare of a boxer preparing for the first-round bell. Taller than Kevin had imagined, he emanated power, with heavily knuckled hands dangling from long, sinewy arms. Kevin aimed to move forward to meet him confidently, yet somehow still felt prohibited from treading on the pristine carpet. Instead, he remained anchored and again extended his hand, more tentatively than he'd intended. "Tell me, Mr. Crabtree," Ben began, "why should I shake the hand of a young man who has for almost a year persistently defied our authority to guide our daughter as we believe righteous in the eyes of God?" "With all due respect, sir, Ashira is not a child." "She's in high school," the father snapped. "You are in college. You're like a silver-tongued serpent polluting her mind. She is too young to recognize the artifice of what you offer." "Artifice?" Kevin raised his voice. "You think I'm tricking her?" "That's not true. Ashira is very important to me, Mr. Chatov. I would never have put up with all this if she hadn't made it clear she wanted to see things through my eyes." Ashira stared oddly at Kevin, as if becoming aware of something previously unseen. "Well, you may know what you want now," Ben answered, "but what do you know of what she needs to lead a fulfilling adult life? When we're young, we think we know how things work. But you don't. Believe me, you don't. How could you know what's important to a girl raised in a faith about which you know nothing?" "Excuse me, I'm standing right here," interjected Ashira. "There are plenty of things about him you don't understand at all, Papa." Her mother could break her heart, but her father could stir her indignation on the turn of a dime. "Forgive me, daughter, but I'm telling you both. You don't know. You don't know what you're doing. You don't know where it will lead, and you don't know how you'll feel about it once you ruin your life boxing yourself in with a spiritual stranger because you wanted to prove us wrong and thumb your nose at the higher principles we live by in this house." "What does that mean, higher?" asked Kevin. "You mean Jewish, sir? I respect your beliefs, Mr. Chatov." "You do not, young man. If you did, you would leave this house immediately, go lick your wounds, and allow Ashira to remain the proud young Sabra she was born to be." "Born to be. Interesting choice of words, sir." He's wrong, thought Kevin. That's not who she was born to be. It's who she was forced to be. I know her. She's someone else. Tell him, Ashira. Say it. Her eyes remained glued to the edge of the carpet. Kevin couldn't read her body language. Meanwhile, Ben's blazing eyes continued to bore into him, fists clenching and unclenching with anticipation. "Ashira?" Kevin felt himself deflating. "She's wilting under pressure. They're breaking her." "This conversation is over," Ben declared. "Your business here is finished." As he clomped back upstairs, Ashira finally met Kevin's eyes. She submitted to a distressed hug, but felt lifeless in his arms. Thereafter, things began to change. First, Daniel dropped out of the picture. Perhaps he'd been pressured by his parents, or the face-off had taken the fun out of it. Kevin couldn't be sure. Her brother had always been kind of a pain anyway. Ashira clung to him for a while, but her embraces now felt desperate, as if driven by guilt or shame. Gradually, the urgency sapped out of their lovemaking. They would go through the motions, but her heart was no longer in it. Now Kevin felt spurned by her. She'd been pulled back into the fold. The chosen people had not chosen him. Meanwhile, he was beginning to notice he was surrounded every day by pretty available women at Temple U who knew what they wanted. Maybe it was time to start looking into that. When the frequency of his phone calls dwindled, she didn't protest. Still, he clung to hope, unable to let go of the rare beauty that had been his. One Thursday he asked, "Velvet Monkeys are at the Ben Ankle tonight. Want to go?" "No, there's something important my mom wants me to do at Temple." "You haven't done anything like that in months. You love the Monkeys. Are you sure?" "My mom needs me." An odd paranoia surged in his chest. "Are you sure it's your mom? Not something else you'd rather be doing than being with me?" "What do you mean by that?" she asked, voice rising. "Do you understand what I put at risk for us all this time? I ripped their hearts out for you. One night I agree to help my mother and you come back at me with accusations?" "Well, I thought you did all that for us, not just for me. You were like a bird that had found its wings. Look, I'm just trying to get real about who I am. Following an awkward silence, she announced, I think we should stop seeing each other. Stung, Kevin didn't raise his voice. You've got it, he said, and hung up. A month later at McCloskey's, he ran into Daniel, who was uncharacteristically non-chatty. Remember those guys who fought over Lisa at the beach, Kevin prompted. Which one did she end up with? Daniel studied the floor around his bar stool, as if he'd dropped his keys. Imagine, thought Kevin, inviting this guy to run his mouth and nothing. Unable to censor himself, he finally blurted, How is she? I gotta go, mumbled Daniel, slipping off the stool. Give him hell at school. A year later at Suburban Square, Kevin ran into Lisa, the trophy of the beach fight. First I dated Rodney, the guy who won, she said, but he ended up being kind of a douchebag. So then I went out with Tim, the loser, and he was even worse. Too soft. I mean, I'm looking for a man. In passing, she mentioned Ashira's engagement to a former Israeli paratrooper in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. It was apparent she considered it common knowledge, but it was news to Kevin. He imagined a macho, brooding type with a dark complexion and no sense of humor. Her parents must be thrilled, he said. Kevin hadn't thought about any of it for years. It was ancient history. The name Ashira, now voiced by his father on the phone, felt like a misnomer. Kevin didn't think they'd even met. When I was 18, I got a girl pregnant, Jean continued. She was 16. The baby was given up for adoption. Dumbstruck realization spread across Kevin's face. Daniel, you're talking about Daniel. It began to make sense. He'd never had cause to notice before, but Daniel indeed possessed the Crabtree nose, as well as Jean's light caramel complexion, courtesy of his half-Mexican mother, Grandma Belen. Daniel didn't look much like Kevin, but he sure looked like Jean. What the... Okay, he stuttered. I got it. Just need to take it in. I know it's a lot of information. Jean's muted tone fell somewhere between chagrined apology and a desire to soothe. It just never crossed my mind he might try to come find me. Yeah. When they hung up, wheels began spinning in Kevin's head. Ben and Sarah were not Daniel's biological parents, nor were they Ashira's. They'd made Kevin a pariah for seducing their daughter away from their heritage. He was an alien, an outsider. Unlike theirs, his blood was not of the chosen people. But chosen blood did not flow through the veins of their adopted children either. To compensate, they had maintained a vice-like grip on their kids' psyches. Oh, to see the looks on their faces upon learning the blood they couldn't share with their children was in fact shared by the beloved Daniel with the detested Kevin. So I made it with my half-brother's sister. Lucky Dad didn't sire her, too. Those bastards treated me like a pariah, but I'm closer to their fucking kids than they'll ever be. Is Daniel somehow less Jewish because he shares my blood? Your kids are mine, assholes, in ways you can never have them. Jesus Christ, I don't want them. His head began to throb.